So let's talk about tornado safety, some historical tornado, and finally some statistics from tornadoes. You're going to use this presentation to check the answers to the research questions that you have done independently. First of all, pause the video. Tornado watch versus warning. See, is this what you have for the description and what actions you should take? This will be questions 1 through 3. Here's a brief summary of F0 and F1 tornadoes. This is what they do. An F1 or F1 tornado can be bad news for mobile homes. It can turn them upside down. It doesn't destroy them, but it moves them off their foundation. So a big conclusion here, and this is going to be question number 4 on the presentation. What percent of tornadoes are F0 and F1? That's 75%. And that means that most tornadoes are small and don't cause much damage. Now, F2 tornadoes. Now, F2 tornadoes start taking some of the roof off of houses, mobile homes are demolished, and cars are lifted off the ground, about 19% of all tornadoes. Here you can see F2 damage. We now have some of the roof is gone. We have a large tree that has been knocked over. That's indicative of an F2 tornado. Here's a mobile home after an F2 tornado. You can see it's just totally destroyed. Now, F2 tornadoes cause a significant amount of damage and subsequently deaths by knocking over trees, because if the tree comes down on your house or on your car, it can kill you. Now, the big difference between F2 and F3 is that for an F3, now we have the roof is totally gone and some walls are knocked down, but there are still some walls standing. That's the big difference between F2 and F3. F2 only damages the roof. It doesn't start knocking down walls, and F3 does. In addition, an F3 can now pick up and move cars. It can throw cars. It doesn't move it side to side. It can actually pick it up and throw a car. Now, if you have no walls left standing, that's an F4. Big difference with an F4 versus an F3 is F4 can start to generate large missiles. It can take objects and throw them with great forces, great distances. Here's a tree branch that was jammed into the taillight of a car. Here's a nail that was driven into a tree by the force of a tornado. Once again, a fork thrown into a tree. License plate that was jammed into a tree. These are all examples of what a F4 can do. A fork jammed into a tree. In an F4, you get large objects like cars, or in this case, a boat. That boat did not belong to the homeowner of that house. It was thrown there. It's a large missile that is thrown by an F4. Now, an F5 is a little bit different than F4. It's total destruction. F5 totally knocks down all the walls, but then spreads the debris over a wide area. An F4, all of your stuff is still in there, but it's basically in a big pile. So here with F4, there's the house is entirely knocked down, no walls left standing, but all the stuff's still right there. For an F5, that debris right there is not the entire house. It was shredded, it was destroyed, it was thrown over a very, very wide area. That's the big difference between F4 and F5. Kind of sums it up here in this slide. Now, what can you do to protect yourself during a tornado? First of all, number one safety tip in a car. You should not be in a car during a tornado, whether it's moving or parked. Tornadoes can pick up and throw cars. First of all, do not try to outrun a tornado. You never know which direction they're going, and they can move as fast or sometimes faster than your car. What you should do is get out of the car and get into a ditch, because if you're something like this, there's a ditch on the side of the road. If you get in there, the wind is just going to go straight over the top of the ditch. There are many examples of people lying in a ditch where a tornado went straight over their head and they were not harmed. Now, in mobile homes, it's tricky. About the only protection you can offer in a mobile home is you have these straps alongside the house, which will keep it from being flipped up by an F1 tornado. But even an F2 tornado is going to totally destroy a mobile home. Mobile homes are not safe in even small tornadoes. So you should get out of a mobile home and go to someplace that is a lot safer. Now, if you're in a regular building, a traditionally built structure like a house, what we call a stick structure, or a wood framed house, you should go to a small room in the interior of the building, whether it's an apartment, a house, a condo, whatever, because the exterior walls are the ones that are going to come down first. So if you're in interior walls, you're safer. And interior walls that are close together, like in a closet or a bathroom, the closer together the walls are, the safer it's going to be, because the stronger they are because they're closer together. Stay out of big rooms like a high school gym. Not a good place to be, because without anything holding up the roof, it's going to collapse. If you can, get below ground level, because remember that the tornado is up here. It's not going to come down in the basement and dip back out. And you can see here, there's still boxes. The pool table seems to be undisturbed by the tornado, even though this had to be at least an F4 because all the walls are gone. If you can get below ground level, that's the safest place to be. If you're in a very, very large public building, look for rooms that are designated as severe weather shelter areas or tornado areas. These are places in large buildings that are built to be reinforced so that offer some safety from a tornado. Now, what do you do if you live in the Midwest, especially if you're in a mobile home and you don't have any kind of basement? Well, here's some things that are options for you. First of all, what's called a tornado safe. A tornado safe is basically just a reinforced box, either made out of metal or concrete, that is strong enough to withstand a tornado. Here's an example of a demonstration they did, because remember, tornadoes can pick up cars and throw them through the air. Well, they dropped this car from a crane onto this tornado safe to show you how structurally sound it is. So a tornado safe, once again, is a big metal box or big concrete box that you can crawl into, shut the door, and be safe from a tornado. Now, here's a tornado safe. It's poured concrete. It's the type of tornado shelter that's inside of your home. The advantage of this is you don't have to go outside. Here's a home that was leveled by an F4 tornado, and with the solid concrete tornado safe in the center of the house, the family survived. They rode out the tornado and they walked away from this with their lives. Here's a different type of tornado shelter. This is an old propane tank. It's solid metal, and this is meant to be more for one family. It says up to 4 to 5 people can fit into that tight space. Now, it's small, but you only have to stay in there a very small amount, very short period of time. Tornadoes don't last that long. And this is something you would bolt to a concrete floor, either on your patio or in your garage, and get into it. And if the tornado knocks down your house, especially because it has this curved roof, the debris is going to slide off the side and it's not going to crush you, because that's what kills you in a tornado, is the house coming down on top of you. Underground shelters. Underground is by far the safest place to be. So anytime you can have a shelter that's built below ground level, you are safest. Here's one that's made out of fiberglass as opposed to out of concrete. Ground level would be up here. You dig a hole in the ground, you drop this thing in the ground, and you would walk down the steps when the tornado comes, and you hang out down here. Now this cutout here is just so you can see what it looks like. Here's a really cheap, easy way to make a tornado shelter. This is an old shipping container, and you just kind of halfway buried under the ground. This is at a campground in the Midwest, in Nebraska, where they get a lot of tornadoes. You're in a camper, you're in a tent, you need some place to go that will withstand the tornado. And this is another example of a type of tornado shelter. It's just a shipping container that was buried under the ground. Here's a community tornado shelter. It's a building that was built to be resistant to a tornado. Here's a solid concrete building in Tupelo, Mississippi. The tornado is not going to be able to pick up and move a solid concrete structure. So this is another example of a tornado shelter, either out of solid concrete, built below ground. There's a lot of different examples here. Now, you can build tornado-safe homes, and if you live in the Midwest, you would build your house a little bit differently. One of the things you can do is you can put extra braces when you're nailing the wood together. Now, you can see that these little pieces right here, you don't have these in our houses here in Georgia, because we're not that, we don't have a lot of really strong tornadoes. We would just use a couple of nails to nail the house together. It would hold together well enough. But in areas where you get tornadoes that would maybe want to rip the wood apart, you put in extra metal braces that add a lot of strength. You can see them here. You climb them up in your attic, and you would not see these two metal strips that add an extra layer of strength to keeping the wood together. In addition, our walls, when we put up our houses, we nail our walls to the floor. We would normally just drive a nail right here down and into the ground and nail the wall to the concrete. But nails are not nearly as strong as screws. So you see right here, we've got an extra metal plate with a screw instead of a nail. And that adds a lot of strength, especially if you do it over and over again. You can see the results here. Here's a home that was built with those extra tornado features in the center here. You can see it is still primarily standing, has some damage to the roof. This home and this home were destroyed because they were not built the same way with those tornado safety features in construction. Now let's talk about some historic tornadoes. The first is we're going to talk about what's called the Tri-State Tornadoes, March 18th, 1925. And it's a very well-studied, very famous tornado in terms of the history and studying of tornadoes. March 18th, 1925. What was unusual about this tornado is that it stayed on the ground for 219 miles. It killed 695 people and injured almost 3,000. It lasted for 3.5 hours, which is the longest lasting tornado of all time. Here's its path. Here's a old black and white photography of what it did. It just leveled whole communities. Here's where the tri-state tornado affects you and I more directly. There were 9 schools that were impacted by this tornado because it struck during the day while students were in class. 69 students were killed, including 33 deaths in this one school that you see in the picture, DeSoto, Illinois. So this caused a lot of people to be upset because this was at a day and time where mandatory school attendance was just kind of getting in full swing. Before this time, these kids' parents maybe didn't go to school, especially through high school. Well, now they were being made to go to school, had all our kids in one building, and they were not safe in the event of a tornado. They would have been safer at their homes where they could have gone into their underground storm shelters. So because of this tornado, there was a change in the law and the thought about schools. It is because of this tornado that we are now required to have tornado drills in schools, because the thought was now, hey, we have all these kids together in this building. We need to teach them how to be safe in the event of a tornado. In addition, new rules were passed that schools had to be built to a higher standard. They had to be built to withstand tornadoes, because it's one thing if your kid gets killed with you in your own house. But if you are going to make me send my child to school, I'm going to demand that you keep them safe. So it was a radical kind of change in thought in terms of school safety, especially from tornadoes. Now let's talk about deadliest tornadoes. And you can see the tri-state up there is 695, and you can see going down to the smallest. Now, if we see a pattern here, if you look at these dates, let's see what we notice. We got 1925, 1840, 36, 47, 89. The most recent one is 1953. So basically, there hasn't been any tornado since 1953 that's been able to make this list. Now, that doesn't mean we haven't had a lot of tornadoes. It just means that people are not being killed by tornadoes as much as they used to. That's the big conclusion. And that is number 15 on your sheet. What is the trend in tornado deaths over time? Tornado deaths are decreasing. Well, we can see that. Tornado deaths are going down. Fewer and fewer people are dying from tornadoes. The reason is technology and communication. We get alerts on our cell phone. We listen to the radio. We hear weather alerts. We check the weather.com app, whatever. But in 1925, when radio was still in its infancy, there was no way to let people know that a tornado was coming. Now we would all find out about it, and we would be able to take steps to get ourselves safe. This is why none of the deadliest tornadoes have happened since 1953. Some other facts and figures about how many tornadoes happen every year. About 800 to 1,000, give or take. How fast do they move? Well, they move across the ground about 30 to 70 miles an hour. So as fast as you can normally drive a car, especially on a surface street. How long do they last? Well, mostly we're talking about in the minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes maybe. But as we've seen, they can last up to a couple hours. Tornadoes have occurred in every state, but 75% of all of the world's tornadoes occur in the United States. We are tornado central. We get by far more tornadoes and more severe tornadoes than any other place on the planet. Let's look at Georgia. Georgia, we average about 20 to 30 tornadoes every year. The deadliest one in Georgia was 1936, and that was on that list that I showed you before. 203 people died. In 2008, we had a really bad year. We had 86 total tornadoes. And from, notice, 1950 to 1998, a span of 48 years, there were 111 tornado deaths. That's over the whole 48 years, average of 2 years. So you can see tornado deaths are going down. There's a track, gives you an idea of where tornadoes occur in Georgia. March 14, 2008 was a notable day in tornado history for us because we had an F2 tornado that struck actually right through downtown Atlanta, which is unusual because most tornadoes do not strike in large cities. The big buildings tend to get in the way of the airflow and tends to inhibit tornadoes from forming. That tornado damaged the Georgia World Congress Center, damaged the old Georgia Dome because it went right over downtown. There was an old condominium near the King Center, which the roof was torn off. One of our former counselors here at Centennial High School actually lived in that building. She had to move out while they replaced and fixed the building over the course of about a year. A lot of the large buildings in downtown had their windows blown out. Not from the strength of the tornado, because it was only an F2, but because it picked up little bits of debris and threw little missiles at the glass, and it caused the glass to break and shatter. On May 4th, 2007, an F5 tornado struck Greensburg, Kansas. And this is very notable because only 1 in 1,000 tornadoes ever get to be F5s. And most of these occur in the Midwest, where it's mostly farmland. So even if you get a tornado, an F5, odds are it's just going to plow through a bunch of open fields. But this one actually happened to hit a town, the town of Greensburg, Kansas. It leveled every building in the entire town. It was a total destruction, almost like a bomb went off. And this is what an F5 does. Here is Greensburg High School. This is a building, this is a school that is meant to be tornado safe. And you can see what happened to it in an F5. This is in Tornado Alley. This is a place where they know they get bad tornadoes. So they build their schools to be very tornado safe. And you can see it didn't matter. An F5 is just almost total destruction. It even bent a flagpole, and a flagpole doesn't catch any wind at all. That's the power of an F5. So at this point, you've made the corrections on your research questions that you did independently. This time, you're going to take the notes check and get it done, get a grade before the end of the class period.